few years ago, I got one of those activity trackers that people sometimes wear. You know, they're like a second watch that you put on. And the one that I had was very basic. It just told me about how much I was sleeping and about how many steps I took. And it gave me some data that were really interesting to hear. It said, you're waking up several times during the night in a pattern that is consistent with an intolerance to noise and to light. So the recommendation was that I do something to block the noise, like earplugs, and I do something to block the light, like those light-blocking shades or blinds. So the earplugs were easy. Go to any drugstore, little foam earplugs like construction workers wear. I rolled it between my fingers, stuck it in, and I would say I slept poorly for about 3 nights before I got used to them. So that was pretty easy. I still wear them every night. So then there was the matter of the darkness. How to keep my room completely dark so I wouldn't be disturbed by light. I had some of those blinds that you can get at any hardware store, and they weren't doing well at all. So then I went to Lowe's and looked at the light blocker blinds. Whew, they are not cheap. And I've talked to people who have them and they say, you know what though? Unless they're completely flush against the window, the light comes in. So I thought, well, maybe I could do it yourself with a kind of rigmarole, kind of patch it together approach. So I took blankets and threw them over the drapery rods, but I'm not going to do that every night. That lasted about 2 nights. So eventually I went on Amazon and I found an eye mask. And it doesn't work that well, you know. I've gone through about 5 different kinds. Now I've settled on the one that works best enough. But most nights it winds up on the floor or down by my feet, because when I toss and turn, it comes off. And it's still worth wearing. I think it still helps. But if it just shifts a little, the light comes in. And that is a very important spiritual lesson, because it is really hard to keep things dark. The light is so powerful that even a tiny little bit threatens the dark completely. And the reason it is hard to keep things dark is because we live in a bright world. And you've probably never heard anybody say that before. I never have. We always say the exact opposite, don't we? Oh, it's a dark world. It sure is a dark world. And of course, there's a lot of darkness in this world. And it's hard to watch the news. And all of that is real. But it is also true that that's not even half the story of life, because it is a much brighter world than it is a dark world. If you've ever tried to block out the light in your house, you know that darkness is very fragile. It is very appropriate that we celebrate this season of light in the darkest time of the year, when every day is a little bit darker than the day before. And there are seasons of life that feel exactly like that. I know there are families going through that in our parish right now. I know there's people sitting here that are in the middle of a time in life where every day feels dark, and it feels sometimes like it's getting darker each day. And that is why candlelight is the centerpiece of our spiritual practice in this season. It is a reminder during the darkest time of the year that darkness is fragile, and that a little light dispels a lot of darkness. Many of you have heard me refer to the way that I start my day with the 3 C's. Some of you know exactly what that means: coffee, candle, and Christ. It started a long time ago, and all it is something that I started one Advent and just wound up loving and never wanted to stop. I started by setting my alarm 5 minutes earlier than I normally would, making my coffee, and then lighting a candle in a dark corner and drinking my coffee looking at the candle. And that is it. That is it. And I was told that for this kind of prayer in Advent, you don't need to pray any prescribed prayers unless you wish to. If you wish to do a decade of the Rosary, that would be great. If you wish to pray a certain memorized prayer, you could. If you wanted to do some kind of examination of conscience or some kind of reflective prayer, you could do that. But you don't need to. And I was encouraged to try not doing that. Let the light shining in the darkness do the work. Let it speak. And I can tell you that now, all these years later, 19 years since I started, I do it every day for 45 minutes now. And nothing has helped me more. I don't know what exactly it is that makes this combination of things so beautiful. I give it enough time now that I can do all sorts of things like the office that priests pray, and I pray at daily reflections, and I pray intentional prayers for people, but I still have enough time to spend time just in the silence looking at the candle in the light. When I started doing that in 2003, I was a religion teacher in a Catholic high school. And by Christmas break, the kids noticed that something was different. Mr. V, why are you in such a good mood? What's with you? And then nothing had changed but that daily practice. It was very subtle at first, but I think I was strengthened by the daily awareness that darkness is fragile. That is true in a room where people are trying to sleep, and that is also true in the experiences of life. And if you look back over some of your darkest times, you probably would agree completely. Earlier this year, a member of our community died at an old age, Richard. He was a World War II vet, and he was married to his wife, Anne, for 74 years. And it was really hard to do that burial service in our cemetery because I just couldn't stand looking at the face of someone who lost a spouse of 74 years. I just felt so sad with her and thought of what a dark time it was for her. She's a great part of our lives. She taught for several years at St. Mary's Academy, and she was very brave and very strong during Richard's funeral. But staying in touch with her daughter, I learned that not long after that, she had a fall. And then she was very weak, and she was not doing well. And when they took her to the doctor, the news was not good. So she wound up going on palliative care, and she wasn't able to stay in her home that she'd been in for 75 years any longer, so she moved into her daughter's house, into a guest room. And she was only there for a week before she died. And then again, I thought for that poor daughter, oh my gosh, losing her father and her mother so close in time. And a lot of times we think that if people live to be old, it makes you grieve less. But I think sometimes it can be even more because you lived your entire life with them. And it's so hard to imagine anything without them. All those years. Kids in their 60s and 70s who never went without their parents. So when I was talking with that daughter and planning Anne's funeral, she told me that something very beautiful happened in the last week of her mom's life. It started off hard because Anne had said to her daughter, I just want to go see my garden one more time. I just want to go home and see my garden one more time. And there was no way for her to do that. There was just no way. So the daughter didn't know what to say to her mom, but the grandson heard about it, and he had an idea. And so he went over to his grandmother's house, and he dug up all of her favorite flowers, and he transplanted them outside of her window at the guest room at her daughter's house. And they opened the blinds one day, and they said, Mom, look. And there was her garden, outside a new window, brought there by her grandson, who interestingly was her grandson-in-law. It's a bright world. It's hard to keep things dark. No matter how dark things seem, even a little bit of light turns into a luminous, radiant experience. It doesn't mean that the light removes all the darkness. It still can be a shadowy time, but darkness is fragile. So this week we are being invited to consider what we are going to do to bring light into the darkness. Would the 3 C's be something you'd like to try for these 4 weeks? Getting up 5 minutes earlier? Little efforts make a big difference, you know. A little bit of light can go a long way. Would that be a simple way to embrace an Advent practice? A little beam of candlelight can go right through the darkness of a morning where the sun doesn't come up until almost 8 o'clock. And the darkness can't handle the light at all. It runs off like a scolded puppy. Advent indeed may be a dark time, but darkness is fragile.